Hi there folks, so welcome to your new ukulele. This is going to be a very quick little kind of overview of hopefully what you're holding in your hands. It might look a little different from mine. I mean, maybe it looks a little bit more like one of these, okay, but it's the same thing, okay. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of the bits and pieces that you see on your ukulele, because if you're going to learn how to play it, it's going to be important to know what the bits and pieces on it are. So I would say the ukulele is broken up into kind of three main areas, and that is the body, the neck, and the head, or the headstock it's sometimes called. If we start up here at this end at the head, there's not a lot going on up here, to be honest, except for your tuners or your tuning pegs or tuning keys, whatever you want to call them. They will let you tighten or loosen the string to raise or lower the note to get it in tune, and it's very important that each string is in tune to the correct note, and I've got a separate video on that which you can use to help get yourself in tune. We're just going to carry on taking a look at this little thing. So really that's it for the headstock. So let's keep moving down the ukulele, and when you come to the neck, there's this chunk of plastic here which is called the nut. This is where the neck and the headstock kind of meet, okay, you can't miss it. You should notice with your nut then that each string has kind of got a little groove cut in, or there's a groove cut in for each string, I should say. That helps keep the string in place. It stops it kind of wobbling about all over the place, so you can grab hold of it and it's not just a bit of spaghetti wobbling about the place. The nut also works in conjunction with this other thick chunk of plastic back here. This one's called the saddle back here, and these two bits work together to keep the string raised off of the front face of the neck there, or the fingerboard or the fretboard, okay. It has to be raised a little bit, because if this is not free to vibrate and move, then you're not getting any sound out of that at all. That string has to be able to vibrate and move to make a sound, okay? So it has to be raised a little bit for that to happen. And the height that the string kind of is away from the fretboard, we call that the action. So you sometimes might hear people talk about having a high or a low action. If your action is too high, if the strings are too far away from the fretboard, it can be a bit of a pain, okay? Firstly, it means that you've got to push the string down further, so it's going to dig into your fingers a little bit more when you're new. But worse than that, actually, the act of kind of pushing the string that far can pull your notes out of tune. So a really kind of cheap, nasty ukulele might have a bad action that's too high, or perhaps too low. And again, if it's too low, that's going to mean that string can't rattle around properly, and you're going to struggle to get notes out of it, or when you do get a note, it's kind of really buzzy or dead, okay? So watch out for that. If you feel like it's not quite right, then you can send me a picture of it if you like, and I'll try and diagnose it. Or you might have someone you can ask about it. You can find some examples of that online. There's not that much you can do to fix it yourself, so if it's a really cheap ukulele, it's probably a case of getting another one, or taking it to someone who can get that repaired for you. It is possible to repair, but if your ukulele only costs £10, then you might be better off buying a £20 one that's a little bit better. So that's the nut. Let's keep on moving down the neck then, okay? So overall, this whole business here is called the neck. The front face of it, I've already mentioned, is called the fingerboard or the fretboard, and this is where, for most of you, it'll be your left hand. This is where your left hand is going to go, and a lot of action is going to happen here, okay? This is where your fingers will push the string down to the wood. Okay, so that's why we call it a fingerboard or a fretboard, because we've got these metal strips that run across the front, and those are our frets, okay? Your frets are really super important. They're like the keys on a piano. Each one will give you a different note, and the way to fret a note, the way to actually push your finger down to get that note, is not to push it down on top of the fret, because that actually comes out a bit dead there. It's just behind it, and by behind it I mean on the headstock side of it, okay? This, although you might kind of think about your ukulele as being like this and this being the top, this is actually the bottom of the ukulele, okay? Up by the headstock there. So this is the back end of it, and this is the lower end of it, and we want to be behind that fret. If you go there and push that down to the wood, then you should get a nice clear note. If you go too far back, it's going to be buzzy, it's not going to ring out right, and especially down by the nut there, it's going to take a lot more pressure and hurt your finger more. So just behind the fret is where you push that finger down. Your frets are numbered, so this is fret number 1. Remember, this is the bottom, okay? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way along until you run out. I've got a concert size ukulele, and this has got, I think, 16 frets. To be honest, more is not necessarily better. The 16th fret sounds as good as this. It's pretty uninspiring. I've not really found much use for it. If you've got a soprano size ukulele, like one of these, you'll have 12 frets, and 12 is more than enough. To be honest, everything I'm going to show you on a beginner's course is going to take place within the first 3 frets anyway, okay? There's so much mileage just down at this bottom end of the ukulele. There's hundreds and hundreds of songs you can play right there without ever coming up here. So we're going to call this up here the dusty end, okay? We're not going to be up there very much. So you might have dots on the front, or if you don't have dots on the front, then you might have them along the top here. Those are fret markers. Now, like I said, we're going to focus ourselves kind of down here, but later on in your ukulele playing, you might find yourself venturing further along the neck, and these just act as helpful little markers. If you have to jump up to the 5th fret, there's a great big dot there showing you where that one is. Or if you need to go up to 12, you've often got a double dot there. 12 gets a double dot because 12 is actually quite important. There's 12 musical notes, okay, in all Western music. So everything from Beethoven to Britney Spears is made up from 12 notes. And having 12 frets means that along each string, you've got access to each one of those 12 notes, which is really handy. So if we follow our strings down the neck then, when we get to the body, it's hard to miss the great big gaping hole in the front. That's the sound hole. Now, acoustic instruments, they work by you bashing the strings, whether that's one or many. Those strings vibrate, and that sound wave that's created from that vibration and it bounces around inside the hollow body comes back out of that sound hole and is a little bit louder for bouncing off of that backboard there. If you stuffed this full of old socks and tea towels, you'd have a very dull and very quiet sounding ukulele, which wouldn't be very much fun. So try and avoid stuffing socks in there. After the hole, if we keep going, you'll get down to this little back unit here. Now we call this the bridge. I've already mentioned the saddle that lives here that helps keeps the strings raised. Now my bridge might look ever so slightly different to yours. You might have your strings actually tied onto the bridge, or in some rarer cases your strings actually might hit the bridge and then disappear down inside the body. Mine kind of look like they're doing that, but they're actually, you might not be able to see, there's a little knot in the end of the strings which sits in a little groove on the back end there. It really doesn't matter how your strings are fixed onto that bridge. It's just important that they are fixed onto that bridge, okay? If you lost a string, if one came off, you have to get it sorted out down here before you can then take it up to your tuner and tune it up there, okay? Touch wood though, you shouldn't ever have to mess around with that as long as you don't have any nasty tuning mishaps and your ukulele is reasonably set up to start with. So that's really the main bulk of the bits and pieces on the ukulele. A couple of other quick things I'll mention then. If you're looking at mine, you might be thinking, well, that looks a bit of a different shape to mine. If you're on something like our little soprano here, I've got an extra kind of cutaway here. That's because this is an electro-acoustic model, okay? I've got a little jack plug that I can plug into amps and things. Very rarely do that, to be honest, especially now that there's not many gigs going. But that just allows you access to those higher frets, and that's pretty common on electroacoustics. But as I said, I don't find myself up here all that often. All the good stuff is down here. Aside from that, I've got a few little extra dials and things on here. I've actually got a tuner built in to this, which is not working at the moment because it ran out of battery. But that's my problem, not yours. Aside from that then, the only other thing that's worth mentioning is a strap. Okay, now you might have on your ukulele at the back a peg or a button to affix a strap to. If you're lucky, you might even have one here or perhaps under the neck here. I didn't have those on mine, so I've been creative and I've tied a bit of string on the end of my strap around a little headphone adapter there, plugged it into the jack socket, and then taken the string round under the strings at the headstock there. You might be able to attach yours a little bit better than that, but if you don't have those pegs or those buttons on, you can get them fixed on there. It's fairly cheap to get done if you take it to a music shop. A lot of places will do that for you pretty cheap. Or you can buy kits off Amazon and do it yourself if you're kind of DIY inclined. I didn't fancy taking a drill to my ukulele because I can barely work a hammer, but you might be better at that than me, okay? So that's about it for the parts of the ukulele. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of an overview of what you're holding in your hands. Next stop is watch my tuning video and we'll get the thing in tune. Cheers.